The Israel-Gaza conflict represents one of the world's most intractable and emotionally charged disputes. At its heart lies a territorial struggle between two peoples, Israelis and Palestinians, each claiming the same land as their own. This conflict is deeply rooted in history, intertwined with religion, and fueled by decades of violence, mistrust, and failed peace attempts. The land in question, historically known as Palestine, holds immense religious and historical significance for both Jews and Arabs. It is considered the biblical promised land for Jews and is home to sacred sites for Muslims and Christians as well. This shared religious heritage, rather than fostering unity, has unfortunately become a source of division and contention. The modern conflict traces its roots back to the late 19th century with the emergence of Zionism, a movement advocating for the creation of a Jewish state in Palestine. At the same time, the Arab population in Palestine sought self-determination and resisted the influx of Jewish immigrants. As Jewish immigration increased, tensions flared between the two communities, leading to outbreaks of violence. The 1947 UN partition plan, proposing the division of Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states, failed to resolve the conflict. The subsequent Arab-Israeli War of 1948 resulted in Israel's establishment and the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, an event known in the Arab world as the Nakba, or catastrophe. This event remains a deeply traumatic experience etched in the Palestinian collective memory, shaping their narrative of dispossession and loss. The 1967 Six-Day War further altered the landscape of the conflict. Israel's decisive victory resulted in its occupation of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip, territories predominantly inhabited by Palestinians. This occupation, lasting for over 5 decades, remains a core point of contention. The Palestinian struggle for statehood intensified after the 1967 war, with the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, emerging as a key representative of the Palestinian people. The First Intifada, a Palestinian uprising against Israeli occupation in the late 1980s, underscored the deep-seated resentment and desire for self-determination among Palestinians. The Oslo Accords, signed in the 1990s, offered a glimmer of hope for a peaceful resolution. The Accords envisioned a two-state solution, with Israel and an independent Palestinian state coexisting side by side. However, the process faltered amidst continued violence, political instability, and a lack of trust between the two sides. The Second Intifada, marked by intense violence and suicide bombings, dealt a severe blow to the peace process. The subsequent construction of the separation barrier by Israel, intended as a security measure, further entrenched physical and psychological divisions between Israelis and Palestinians. At the heart of the Israel-Gaza conflict lie three fundamental issues: land, identity, and security. For Palestinians, the conflict revolves around the loss of their homeland and the struggle for self-determination. The displacement of Palestinians in 1948, the ongoing occupation of the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and the blockade of Gaza are constant reminders of their dispossession. Palestinian identity is intrinsically linked to the land, with their historical narrative emphasizing their connection to the region for centuries. The struggle for statehood is not merely about political control, but about reclaiming their identity, dignity, and right to self-governance in their ancestral homeland. For Israelis, the conflict is primarily about security and survival. Surrounded by Arab states with a history of hostility, Israelis perceive the conflict as an existential threat. They point to the numerous wars and terror attacks they have endured as justification for their focus on security measures, including the occupation and the construction of the security barrier. The Israeli narrative also emphasizes the historical and religious connection of Jews to the land, viewing Israel as their ancestral homeland. Israel's creation is seen as a return to their ancient roots, a fulfillment of biblical prophecy, and a refuge for Jews after centuries of persecution. The Palestinian narrative is steeped in the experience of displacement, occupation, and loss. The events of 1948, known as the Nakba, remain a defining moment in Palestinian collective memory. The displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from their homes and lands The destruction of villages and the ongoing refugee crisis are deep wounds that continue to shape their worldview. The subsequent decades of Israeli occupation have further solidified the Palestinian narrative of dispossession and struggle. The expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank, the restrictions on movement, and the economic hardship caused by the blockade of Gaza are viewed as deliberate attempts to marginalize and control the Palestinian population. The Palestinian narrative emphasizes their resilience and determination in the face of adversity. The First and Second Intifadas, while differing in tactics, are viewed as acts of resistance against occupation and a testament to their unwavering desire for freedom and self-determination. The image of the Palestinian youth throwing stones at heavily armed Israeli soldiers has become a symbol of their struggle against a powerful oppressor. The Palestinian narrative also highlights the injustices they believe are inherent in the status quo. They point to the disparity in rights between Israelis and Palestinians living under occupation, the demolition of Palestinian homes, and the detention of Palestinians without trial as evidence of a system designed to perpetuate their subjugation. The Israeli narrative is shaped by a deep-seated sense of insecurity and vulnerability. Surrounded by hostile Arab states and having faced numerous wars and terrorist attacks since its inception, Israelis view the conflict as an existential threat to their very survival. They emphasize the need for strong military deterrence and proactive security measures to protect their citizens. The Holocaust, the systematic genocide of Jews during World War II, serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of anti-Semitism and the need for a safe haven for the Jewish people. Israel's creation is seen as a direct response to this historical trauma, a guarantee that Jews will never again be powerless and vulnerable to persecution. The Israeli narrative emphasizes their willingness to make peace, citing their acceptance of the Oslo Accords and their withdrawal from Gaza in 2005 as evidence of their desire for a negotiated settlement. However, they also point to the continued violence and terrorism emanating from Palestinian groups as justification for their firm stance on security. Israel's construction of the separation barrier, while criticized internationally, is viewed by many Israelis as a necessary measure to prevent suicide bombings and other attacks. They argue that the barrier has significantly reduced terrorism and saved Israeli lives, even if it comes at the cost of increased hardship for Palestinians. The Israeli narrative also highlights their contributions to the region in terms of technology, innovation, and economic development. They believe that Israel, as a vibrant democracy in a turbulent region, can be a force for progress and stability, but only if their security concerns are addressed. The Israel-Gaza conflict is not just a regional issue. It reverberates on the global stage, impacting international relations and fueling political debates worldwide. The conflict has become a focal point for various geopolitical interests, often entangled with historical alliances, religious affiliations, and strategic considerations. The United Nations has played a significant role in addressing the conflict, passing numerous resolutions and providing humanitarian aid to Palestinians. However, the UN Security Council, often paralyzed by the veto power of the United States, a staunch ally of Israel, has struggled to implement effective solutions. The Arab world, largely unified in its support for Palestinian statehood, has exerted diplomatic pressure on Israel, advocating for an end to the occupation. However, the Arab world itself is far from monolithic, with varying degrees of support for the Palestinian cause and differing approaches to the conflict. The European Union, a major provider of aid to Palestinians, has consistently called for a two-state solution, criticizing Israeli settlement expansion and the blockade of Gaza. However, European nations differ in their stances, with some more critical of Israeli policies than others. The United States, Israel's closest ally, has historically played a mediating role, attempting to broker peace agreements between the two sides. However, US policy has often been perceived as biased towards Israel, particularly under certain administrations, drawing criticism from the Arab world and pro-Palestinian groups internationally. As of 2024, the Israel-Gaza conflict remains mired in a seemingly intractable stalemate. The two-state solution, once seen as the most viable path to peace, appears increasingly distant amidst ongoing violence, political instability, and a lack of trust between the two sides. The year 2024 witnessed a new wave of violence erupting in Gaza, further deepening the divide between Israelis and Palestinians. The escalation was triggered by a series of events, including the expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank, the demolition of Palestinian homes in East Jerusalem, and the death of a prominent Palestinian political prisoner in Israeli custody. The ensuing clashes involved rocket fire from Gaza into Israel, met with retaliatory airstrikes by the Israeli military. The violence resulted in casualties on both sides, further fueling anger and resentment. International calls for a ceasefire went largely unheeded as both sides dug in, determined to assert their dominance. Adding to the complexities of the situation is the internal political landscape on both sides. Israel's political scene is fractured, with right-wing factions advocating for a more hardline approach towards the Palestinians, while left-leaning parties call for renewed peace efforts. The Palestinian leadership is equally divided, with the Fatah-dominated Palestinian Authority in the West Bank struggling to maintain control, while Hamas, considered a terrorist organization by Israel and many Western countries, holds power in Gaza. This division within the Palestinian leadership hinders their ability to present a united front and negotiate effectively with Israel. The question remains, is a lasting peace achievable in this seemingly intractable conflict? While pessimism prevails, glimmers of hope exist, albeit faint and fragile. The international community must play a more active role, moving beyond condemnations and symbolic gestures to actively pressuring both sides towards meaningful negotiations. A renewed peace process requires bold leadership from both Israelis and Palestinians, leaders willing to make difficult compromises for the greater good of their people. Such leadership must transcend the entrenched narratives of victimhood and security concerns, focusing instead on a shared future where both peoples can live in peace and security. A sustainable solution necessitates addressing the core issues of the conflict: land, identity, and security. This involves finding a just resolution to the refugee issue, ending the occupation and the expansion of settlements, and guaranteeing the security of both Israelis and Palestinians. Economic development and cooperation could serve as a bridge between the two sides. Joint ventures, infrastructure projects, and trade agreements could foster interdependence and create a shared stake in a peaceful and prosperous future. People-to-people initiatives, particularly among the younger generation, hold immense potential. Dialogue, cultural exchange programs, and joint educational projects can help break down stereotypes, build understanding, and create a foundation for a more peaceful future. The path to peace is fraught with obstacles, but the alternative, continued conflict and suffering, is simply unacceptable. It is time for bold leadership, creative solutions, and a renewed commitment to dialogue and reconciliation. Only then can the ancient claims give way to a modern peace, allowing both Israelis and Palestinians to build a shared future free from fear and violence. And